What if I told you that ancient Roman engineering principles could have launched us into the space age a millennium ahead of schedule? Historians have identified innovations that might have sparked an accelerated technological revolution, if only the empire hadn't fractured in 476 AD. The technological revolution that never was. Rome's engineering prowess wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary. Their architectural innovations, like the arch and dome, fundamentally transformed what was possible in construction. But here's the thing. Rome was on the cusp of something even greater when it fell. Their engineers had been systematically solving problems for centuries, creating a knowledge base that was about to hit critical mass. Consider Hero of Alexandria's Aeoli pile in the 1st century AD. A working steam-powered device that spun when heated. In our timeline, it remained a temple curiosity rather than the spark of an industrial revolution because Rome relied heavily on slave labor, eliminating economic incentives for labor-saving machines. But what if Rome hadn't fallen? What if that steam device had evolved from novelty to necessity? Imagine Roman engineers refining the Aeoli pile into practical energy sources, perhaps powering textile looms in Syria or grain processing factories along the Nile. Would this have been Rome's version of what's his steam engine, but arriving a millennium earlier? The Roman Empire maintained sophisticated networks that spread innovations rapidly across territories. As the empire stabilized and expanded, economic pressures would have eventually transformed the slave economy, making mechanical solutions increasingly valuable. Romans excelled at scaling and adapting innovations. By 700 AD, in our alternate timeline, water wheels would have evolved from simple grain mills into complex power sources. Picture Roman industrial complexes along the Tiber, water wheels turning countless gears, powering automated hammers striking metal, while standardized parts moved along primitive assembly lines. Their glass manufacturing might have developed into mass production systems. Roman metallurgy would have continued advancing, yielding stronger steels and precision tools centuries ahead of our timeline. Without the medieval knowledge losses, mathematicians working within the empire would have built directly on ancient works. Concepts like calculus might have emerged in the 9th century instead of the 17th. By 1000 AD, this alternate Rome might have reached a technological level comparable to our early 1700s by 1500 AD. They could have developed computational devices, advanced medicine, and primitive electrical technologies, all while our actual timeline was just emerging from the Renaissance. A world united under Latin. Languages shape empires as much as swords and roads do. When Rome fell, it didn't just lose territory, it lost its voice. Latin, once spoken from Britain to Syria, shattered into a dozen different languages that would eventually become French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. This linguistic splintering might be the most overlooked consequence of Rome's collapse. In our alternate timeline, a traveller in the year 1000 AD could journey from Londinium to Damascus, speaking the same core language everywhere they went. Regional accents would exist, much like how Americans, Australians, and Brits speak English differently today, but these would be considered dialects rather than separate languages. Proper Latin would be taught in imperial schools across 3 continents, functioning as a universal operating system for human thought and communication. The benefits would transform society. When a physician in Alexandria discovered a new treatment, or an engineer in Gaul developed an improved water wheel, their written works would immediately be understandable to educated people across the entire empire. No translations needed, no meaning lost, no delays as texts slowly crossed linguistic boundaries. This linguistic unity would turbocharge the pace of innovation. Scientific collaboration across vast distances would become routine. Roman universities would host students and scholars from every province, all communicating effortlessly in the same academic language. A scholar could wake up in Hispania, discuss philosophy over breakfast, travel to Rome for afternoon debates on engineering, and correspond with colleagues in Egypt by evening, all in Latin. As Rome expanded beyond its historical borders, Latin would spread with it into Central Asia and northern territories, potentially eliminating many Germanic languages. Language fundamentally shapes how we think. Latin's precise grammatical structure and rich vocabulary for abstract concepts would influence philosophy, law, and science throughout its expanded Roman world, creating distinct intellectual traditions. Religious development would be profoundly altered as well. The translation issues that created significant theological disputes within Christianity would diminish. The theological splits that divided Eastern and Western Christianity might never have occurred. This linguistic continuity would create a shared cultural identity spanning multiple continents, a cultural gravity pulling diverse peoples toward a common center rather than allowing them to drift apart. Empires in collision, Rome versus China. While Rome and Han China both existed at the same time, they were distant giants separated by vast plains and mountains, aware of each other only through whispers and traded goods. The Parthian Empire stood between them like a jealous middleman, controlling what flowered between east and west. But in our alternate timeline, with Rome continuing its expansion eastwards, these two civilization-defining empires would eventually have to come face to face, and what a meeting it would have been. Imagine Roman legionnaires marching across the steppes of Central Asia in the 7th century. A centurion raises his hand to halt the formation as strange soldiers appear on the horizon. Suddenly, projectiles rain down with devastating speed and accuracy. "By Jupiter," the centurion gasps, watching his perfectly ordered formation scatter before Chinese crossbows and early gunpowder weapons. Two military traditions, each defined over centuries, clash in spectacular fashion. The disciplined Roman infantry would need to adapt quickly or face annihilation. The cultural collision would prove even more profound. Rome's integrationist approach to empire building stood in stark contrast to China's worldview. Where Romans saw potential citizens to be assimilated, the Chinese saw barbarians beyond the borders of their Middle Kingdom. This fundamental difference in imperial philosophy would create fascinating tensions as they established diplomatic relations. Direct trade would transform both societies. Silk would flow directly into imperial markets, while Roman glassware, metals, and engineering knowledge would move eastward, creating economic interdependence centuries before our timeline's globalization. Chinese innovations like paper, which revolutionized record-keeping, would reach Roman engineers who excelled at implementing technologies on a massive scale. Roman mass production applied to Chinese printing techniques would spread knowledge at unprecedented speeds. A Christianizing Rome meeting Confucian and Buddhist China would spark new schools of thought. Christian missionaries would travel eastward earlier, while Confucian ideas about governance might influence Roman administration. Buddhist concepts could blend with Christian theology, creating hybrid philosophical traditions. By 1000 AD, we might witness a hybrid Eurasian culture where Roman architecture elements appeared in Chinese cities, while Chinese aesthetics transformed Roman art, accelerating human progress in ways we can barely imagine. The religious revolution that never happened. What if faith, and not conquest, was Rome's most enduring legacy? When Constantine knelt in prayer as Rome's first Christian emperor, he forever changed the empire's relationship with faith. This pivotal moment in 313 AD, marked by the Edict of Milan granting religious tolerance, transformed Christianity from a persecuted sect into the empire's favored religion. But unlike our timeline, a surviving Rome would have kept this spiritual revolution firmly under imperial control. In this alternate world, the emperor would have remained Christianity's ultimate authority, a divine representative on earth, directing both political and spiritual matters. Christian doctrine would have developed according to imperial priorities, with theological disputes resolved by imperial decree rather than through centuries of debate. Picture grand imperial ceremonies where religious and political authority merged seamlessly. Emperors leading unified worship across 3 continents, with local governors and priests performing identical rituals from Britain to Mesopotamia, reinforcing a shared identity through faith. A strong, unified Roman presence might have fundamentally altered religious development beyond Christianity. The Arabian Peninsula, surrounded by Roman territory and influence, might have evolved differently without the power vacuum that enabled Islam's rise. Christianity's eastward expansion would have faced fewer competing faiths, allowing for a more comprehensive spread of Roman religious influence. The Church would have maintained unity under imperial guidance, preventing the Great Schism of 1054 that split Eastern Orthodox and Catholic traditions. Without independent papal authority developing in the West, theological differences would have remained manageable disputes rather than civilization-defining ruptures. As Rome continued expanding, its approach to religious assimilation would have shaped Christianity in fascinating ways. The empire incorporated elements of conquered people's beliefs into its practices, creating a faith more diverse than what developed in our timeline. Persian Zoroastrian concepts of cosmic dualism might have blended with Christian theology, creating distinctive regional expressions all under one imperial umbrella. This religious tolerance, always secondary to acknowledging imperial authority, would have created stability across the Mediterranean. Jews, pagans, and other minorities might have maintained their traditions within this framework, creating a pluralistic religious landscape unified by imperial oversight. Conclusion. As we've seen, the fall of Rome in 476 AD was the cataclysm that shaped our modern world. That pivotal moment transformed Europe's political landscape, creating a power vacuum where new kingdoms and national identities formed, while the Church preserved ancient knowledge. Would humanity have progressed faster under continued Roman rule? Historians debate whether Rome's collapse accelerated innovation through competition, or whether imperial continuity would have led to stagnation. History's most profound lesson lies in its contingency. What technological marvels might exist today if Rome had endured? The ripples of that ancient collapse continue to shape our world, reminding us how differently everything might have unfolded. Stay tuned.